So back when I was growing up, I used to hear Republicans talk a whole lot about being self-sufficient and not being dependent on the government. And people in my part of the world always put down anyone that was on any form of government assistance, and they still do that. But back then, one of their biggest catchphrases was pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And then Barack Obama came along and said, they tell people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps who don't have boots. And I always thought that was the perfect comeback to that quote they used to say. But now the Republican Party has fallen pretty far because when J.D. Vance is asked here what we can do to help pay for childcare, I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would ever hear a Republican in 2024 give this answer, but here we are.
About lowering the cost of daycare. Hayden, obviously a working family, and it's very hard for working families to get by. How will we lower the cost of daycare?
Such an important question, Charlie. And I think one of the things that we can do is make it easier for family models to choose, or for families to choose whatever model they want, right? So one of the ways that you might be able to relieve a little bit of pressure on people who are paying so much for daycare is make it so that maybe like grandma or grandpa wants to help out a little bit more, or maybe there's an aunt or uncle that wants to help out a little bit more. If that happens, you relieve some of the pressure on all the resources that we're spending in daycare. Now, you talk about just daycare. Let's say you don't have somebody who can provide that extra set of hands. What we've got to do is actually empower people to get trained in the skills that they need for the 21st century. We've got a lot of people who love kids, who would love to take care of kids, but they can't, either because they don't have access to the education that they need, or maybe more importantly, because the state government says you're not allowed to take care of children unless you have some ridiculous certification that has nothing to do with taking care of kids. So empower people to get the skills they need. Don't force every early child care specialist to go and get a 6-year college degree where they've got a whole lot of debt and Americans are much poorer because they're paying out the wazoo for daycare. Empower working families, empower people who want to do these things for a living, and that's what we got to do.
All right,
So they went from pull yourself up by your bootstraps to have Mama and Papa help out. That's their idea of a solution. Can't afford it? Just see if your Mama and Papa could help out. Maybe you got an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or somebody down the road could just chip in and help you, since we're not going to do anything for you. That's basically what he's saying. We don't have any plans to do anything for you to help you in any way, so maybe you could get someone else to help out. So I guess the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps line is now retired, and it's now have Mama and Papa help with it. What's funny about that is that, my generation, I came in right at the tail end of Generation X. And our generation spent more time living with their parents than any generation before. And that's because all the opportunities that we were told we would have when we got out of school just flat out wasn't there. Where I come from, I grew up over in southeast Kentucky, just over the state line here, in the home of Lee Majors, Middlesboro, Kentucky. And there was a talk back when I was growing up of an industrial park that was going to come to our part of the world. It was going to be between Bell and Harlan County. And they went up there and they built this really nice bridge across, and built a really nice road, and they were going to build an industrial park. And then everything fell through. None of those promises came to light. And now we have what is dubbed the bridge to nowhere. If you go there, you just drive across this really nice bridge, go up this really nice road, and then it just dead ends in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing there. And I've always thought that bridge to nowhere pretty much summed up my part of the world. It's always been a bridge to nowhere, thanks to Republican politicians who sells it out from under us and then goes out there and gets people to vote against their own interests by telling them that everyone else is the problem. And one of the biggest things they've preached for years is that people beneath us is the problem. I know so many people who will get so bent out of shape if they see someone using an EBT card. They'll lose their mind over that. And my tax dollars is going to pay for that kid's Skittles. And it's so ridiculous considering all the money that goes to the top 1%, and they never complain about corporate welfare at all. They never complain about those people getting a free ride. It's just someone underneath them that they can punch down at. And I have never understood that mentality. And I've never understood how people in my part of the world can't see that $7.25 minimum wage here in Tennessee in 2024 is pretty damn ridiculous. And I know people that I was having this argument with back 15, 20 years ago, and they were saying then that the minimum wage shouldn't be raised, and they're still saying it today. They're still saying it in 2024, and there is no one that could live on $7.25. A teenager, I know they're going to make the argument, well, it's just McDonald's and stuff like that's just meant for teenagers who are coming up in the world. Even they couldn't survive and drive back and forth to work on that amount of money. People in my part of the world have always been voting against their own interest, and they continue to do so because the Republicans have duped them into thinking that the people beneath them is the problem. People of color is the problem. Immigrants coming across the border is the problem. The gay couple down the street's the problem. None of those people are your problem, ever. That's not your problem. Your problem is the Republican politician who used your God, your flag, and your love of guns against you, and now you're sitting here with a big old bridge to nowhere. If anyone in my part of the world wants to know what the Republican Party did for you, just drive across that bridge, and when you come to nowhere, go, yep, this is what voting against our own interests got us right here. The Republican Party that we used to know, the whole pull yourself up by your boots, is pretty much gone. Now it's just have Mama and Papa help you. You know, just have them help out. And if you read Hillbilly Elegy, that's pretty much JD's entire life was Mama helping out, and his mom going from one disastrous relationship to another. But now JD says that if you're in an abusive relationship, you should stick it out for the kids. Take a look at this.
This is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, you know, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy, and so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages, and I think that's what all of us.
So let's try to make this one make sense. A woman should stay with a dude, even if it's a violent relationship, because the kids are going to suffer if you break up with them. So the kids should just be brought up in that kind of environment and they're going to be okay. That doesn't make sense in any world. And it especially doesn't make sense coming from a guy who saw his mom go through all these things and then thinks that, yeah, I guess she should have just stuck it out with his dad. Is that what you're saying there, JD? Because it really, nothing about that makes sense. But the Republican Party has been hijacked by an extreme version, and they have brainwashed people into believing that the other Republicans aren't real. This morning I released a video about Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney endorsing Kamala Harris, and I cannot count the comments that I've got from MAGA saying, they're rhinos, they're Republicans in name only. Listen, when you say that to me, when I hear you call Dick Cheney a Republican in name only, I know you're new to the political arena. And I know you're new to the political discussion. And I know that you really didn't get into it until one day Donald Trump came down an escalator and you stopped watching Celebrity Apprentice and you started watching him attempt to be a president. Because if you think for 1 second that Dick Cheney is just a Republican in name only, he's not a real Republican. Dick Cheney, if there was a Mount Rushmore of Republicans, Dick Cheney's there, okay? That's what a Republican is. And the fact that you guys are sitting here telling me that he's not a real Republican, Trump's a real Republican. There's nothing Republican about Trump or Vance. There's nothing conservative about Trump or Vance other than they want to control everybody, and especially they want to control the women. That's basically it. Just stay in a violent relationship. If things gets too tough, we're not going to help you. Just ask you Mama or Papa to help out. That's how far the Republican Party has fallen. And if you could have told me 20 years ago that one day there would be these two guys running for president and vice president who would say, have Mama help with it and stay in abusive relationships, I would have said, yeah, that's pretty extreme. That's pretty out there. And I never would have thought I would hear Republicans tell you to just have your Mama help out. Because I know people in my part of the world that criticizes anyone who still lives at home or anyone who's lived at home longer than most. They get criticized for that. But yet, yep, JD says have Mama help with it. Okay. The rest of us will continue to try to have the political discussions, and you guys can take your reality-based bullshit somewhere else.